My name is Kimberly Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions that we like to call ISPS. It is a gift from Congressman Bill Young. It was his goal to make sure that we talked about issues in a manner that were nonpartisan and to prepare future public policy leaders. So we are committed to that work across the state. We would love for you all to engage with us and share what you're interested in learning about, because we have been blessed with having a ton of experts who come to the Institute to share their wisdom. And tonight is no different for our Future Florida's Transportation Program. So first, thank you in advance to our moderator and our panelists for sharing their expertise. And for USF, the student government, and the Center for Urban Transportation Research, and all of our partners, we have one of our board members, the Sembler family, is sponsoring this event. And we're always grateful to have sponsors who care about this type of meaningful work. You're in for a powerhouse moderator with Vicki Shashiri. I know I'm gonna try not to say that wrong, because she's an exceptional journalist, speechwriter, and communications specialist, and has been doing that for 3 decades, documenting and delivering insights on transformational information across the nation's most dynamic spaces for diversity in spaces and in terms of education reporting. She's with the Tampa Tribune and went on to serve as a supervisory. She was a member of the team finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for coverage for the 2000 presidential recount. She spent 13 years here at USF, serving as a speechwriter and director of special projects for the Office of the President, and as a director of strategic communications for USF during the university's transformation into a global institution eligible to join the prestigious American Associations of Universities. And generally, I don't like to read everyone's everything, but when I read Vicki's, I'm like, well, we have to read her everything. Because she's also a member of reporting and editing team for the Forbes 50 over 50. I know what that is personally, I don't know if everyone else does. Collaborating with Know Your Value to spotlight the most impactful women leaders in business. And she's also served as the executive editor for the Florida Trend, which is a 65-year-old magazine. She's a graduate of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, at Arizona State, and has a graduate certificate in globalization studies from USF. Thank you so much, Vicki, for your time tonight. Bo Zimmer is a communications manager for the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority, representing Tampa International Airport and the county's 3 smaller general aviation airports. In his role, he produces video and digital content to help educate the public on aviation industry, media, and local stakeholders on the latest news coming out of America's favorite airport. And I have to say, I do brag about that, because it is awful to go to other airports. I have to say that. I shouldn't say that out loud. But we do have an exceptional airport. Bo is an Emmy-nominated reporter who previously spent 16 years covering breaking news, Florida's space program, aviation, and technology for the Tampa Bay area CBS affiliate. And he's a proud native of St. Petersburg. Thank you.
And a St. Pete College graduate. So.
Thank you. And then Jose de Jesus is a registered professional engineer with over 25 years of experience and has spent the last 10 engineering and managing capital projects for Port Tampa Bay, having been promoted to Director of Engineering in October of 2021. And prior to working on that, he was an engineer consulting, designing a wide range of projects for public and private sectors. He has expertise in sustainable and resilient design and construction. He's also received his BS in Civil Engineering from the University of Florida and is a part of the American Associations of Port Authorities, American Society of Civil Engineers, and he's an alumnus of Leadership Tampa Bay. And finally, Jason Jackman is a senior research faculty with the ITS Traffic Operations and Safety Program here at USF's Center for Urban Transportation and Research. He has extensive experience in safety campaigns and developing that training and educational programs. He earned his Master's of Public Administration from the University of South Florida and serves as an executive member of Bike Florida and is a faculty advisor for the USF Bicycle Club. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Vicki. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind introduction, and I am so thrilled to be with this panel of experts, just really phenomenal thinkers here in the Tampa Bay region who are right at the center of all of our challenges regarding transportation. I want to thank our audience that's here with us today in the beautiful Oval Theater at the USF Marshall Student Center. And also thank our online audience. We really appreciate your time and your interest in this topic. And we're just going to jump right into the questions. I want these gentlemen to be able to spend a good amount of time really sharing their perspectives. And what I love about this panel most, I think, is we've got air, sea, and land covered. and you know, particularly since Florida is a peninsula, we're somewhat hemmed in by those three things in terms of how we move about the state. So I'm going to start with Bo. And Kimberly stole my line about we do have the best airport in the country, and it kind of ruins you for travel anywhere else. Talk a little bit about the challenges of our current transportation system from the perspective of the airport. We have a growing metropolitan area. A lot of people, their first impression of Tampa is the airport, and then they decide they want to move here because it's such a great place. 143 million visitors to Florida every year, which is just an astounding number. And thankfully, they're not all coming through your airport, but a good number of them are. So what are both the challenges and the opportunities that you are encountering along with your teammates at the airport every day?
Yeah, I think you hit it there. Challenges and opportunities. You know, we're constantly trying to attract new international carriers and new flights, while at the same time our area is dealing with unprecedented growth. So you could have the best, most amazing designed airport in the world, but if you can't get your people in and out of the airport, that's a problem. And our CEO, Joe Lopano, who has done an amazing job of attracting new international carriers. It started off with flights from Zurich, and we've expanded recently to Mexico City. We have Colombia coming online very soon. A lot of exciting things happening at the airport. But, you know, his thing is, you know, he said this many, many times in interviews over the years, you know, we fly in a wide body with, you know, hundreds of passengers from Europe or around the world. They come in at 500 miles an hour on a wide body jet. They land at Tampa International Airport to have a great vacation. But then they get off the plane, rent a car, and now all of a sudden they're stuck in traffic trying to get out to Clearwater Beach. And in many cases, you know, you've just taken this long flight and now you're stuck, and it's taken longer to drive than in some cases it does to fly. So, you know, being able to get people in and out of the airport is one of those things. Now, we've got this beautiful new Howard Franklin Bridge coming online in the very, very near future, but at the same time, you've got these beautiful express lanes and other things that are associated with the bridge. But at the end, you're going to have this bottleneck coming into the airport. And until they get that addressed, that could be a challenge for us. Even on our own campus, we've had to address our inbound parkway, which this airport was designed in the 1960s when we didn't have as many people living here. We've grown by millions and millions of passengers. You know, we're up to around 25 million passengers a year now. And the idea of trying to be able to accommodate all of those vehicles coming into the airport is a challenge. And just we sometimes, the busy times of the year, develop gridlock getting in and out of that airport. One of the things that Joe did under his leadership, we moved our rental car center out away from the main terminal. We moved our main office away from the main terminal. That's taken millions of car trips off of our parkways. We installed a brand new train, our SkyConnect train, and that has really helped decongest those areas where you need to have people being dropped off and picked up from the airport. We've also created the first express curbsides at any airport in the nation. That's done a lot. So there was a lot that was done in the early design phases to allow for some of this expansion, and we've continued that while trying to keep Tampa International Airport the great airport it has always been.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Jose, the port, the largest port in Florida by both acreage and tonnage, it is an absolute gem. It certainly is important to the history of the city in its own way, but busy. And as more people move, not just to Tampa, but to the southeast, you have more goods flowing into the port. And also some of those tourists that we talked about You're sort of the crossroads for two of these major trends, which is both Tampa as a market with imports and serving logistics centers throughout the Southeast, and then tourism. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on a daily basis.
No, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about this congestion that we struggle with, that's the same thing for the movement of freight and cargo. I mean, you're stuck on the road trying to get to Orlando. That's the same with truckers trying to get all the containers that come through our port to get to those distribution centers along the I-4 corridor. I think the number I saw about 240 of them, something like that. So it's the same issue. We just to kind of give the audience a little bit of context about the port. I think we drive on roads all day long, so we have opinions about how it should be managed. We're lucky, if we live in Tampa and fly through Tampa International, what a fantastic airport it is. But we operate, very similar to the airport. Just like Bo mentioned, how they're trying to bring those international carriers. We are doing the same thing on the freight side. So we are saying, hey, we have this incredibly fast-growing metropolitan area along Central Florida. So there's a lot of potential customers for you to serve. So we have to convince the shipping lines to come here, and then at the same time, we also have to convince then the beneficial cargo owners, the retailers, hey, bring your business to Tampa. Because then we have to make sure that just like the airport has to make sure that the flights are commercially viable and successful, we do the same thing on the shipping side. We need to make sure that we have enough cargo for those lines to be able to be commercially viable. So yeah, it's a challenge because one of the things that we sell is efficiency. I'm gonna bring back some bad memories, but you guys remember back during the COVID days, seeing the video of the ports out in the West Coast and the traffic jams outside of the ports. Nobody wants that. Not only is it's a headache for cargo owners, for the shipping lines, for us as consumers. So we are selling to these lines. Come directly to Tampa. Don't come to those other larger ports. Because we are that direct connection to the Central Florida area. And if you've flown through the airport, you can put your mind around it. Chances are maybe you haven't been to our port. You think about what comes to our port. If you drove here, the fuel came to our port. If you drove here in a pretty new GM truck or SUV, it came through our port. It was probably manufactured in Mexico, so we have that service. The road you drove on, there's a good chance that both the asphalt and the rock that was used to build came through our port. The concrete, the rock for the concrete, the cement, there's a good chance it came through our port as well. Lumber, steel, rebar, pipes, all kinds of construction material. We're very diversified as a port. That's what's one of the best things that we've done. We made a decision a long time ago that we're not going to fully commit to one service or another. We like diversification because it makes us economically resilient. So again, just hopefully provide a little bit of context as to how ports operate and really the importance of it.
Absolutely. And Jason, you're the lucky one who gets the roads. So, from your perspective, and I think maybe, obviously, our audience, that's the part of the transportation system that we encounter every day are the roads. So, what are you seeing out there in terms of, the state grappling with this growth that is just been unprecedented in the last decade, and how are we keeping up?
So my experience mainly experience with pedestrian and bicycle safety. I'm a cyclist myself. I do a lot of education to drivers as well, young drivers, old drivers. And in my years working at Cutter, I've had the opportunity to work around the state of Florida in actually 25 counties promoting and educating people on safety, whether it's walking, biking, or driving. And it's funny because I always took around this little booklet. It's a bicycle law enforcement booklet. And in the first paragraph of the booklet, it said, Florida was not built for walking and biking back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And, you know, I tell people that all the time. I would bring the book around, look, it says this, and believe it, you know, we were not built. We didn't have the infrastructure. And so we start telling the story when I'm talking to communities about, hey, what's your experience with walking and biking? And the stories are just incredible to hear because everybody has someone who was affected by a crash, whether it's walking, biking, or driving. And they do take safety serious. Fast forward to today, there's a lot of investment with infrastructure, walking, pedestrian infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure. I mean, it's moving really faster than it ever has because there's a need and there's a demand. Based on the crashes in the past, we're moving forward to reduce those crashes because we know that one fatality is one too many for our communities, and you know, our partners that we've worked with, they know that, the community knows that. So again, I've had the experience to listen to people and talk to people and really educate on safety so they can tell their families and their friends, getting the word out. And it's incremental. It's not going to happen automatically. The infrastructure happens, and you need to match it with the education, always. And that goes for many fields too, but for transportation itself, we find that that's a really good solution to make things happen incrementally.
Building a little bit on that, things that we're doing right. Maybe you can talk more specifically, and then we're going to go to the other two panelists just from their perspective. But the education, pedestrian safety education, distracted driving education, is that helping matters? Is it working, or is that sort of a slow build in that effort?
I've worn many hats being at Cutter. We're grant funded, so we work with many agencies to promote different transportation options, different transportation needs, and safety is my area. And working with communities with a program called Safe Routes to School, I've worked with many schools, not only in the Tampa Bay area, but around the state as well. So this is a separate program. And the investment we have put in with our programs, with our partners in infrastructure and education around the schools alone is such a big attribute to our communities and the state. So you got to think, okay, well, how were these kids getting to school in the first place? Well, they built the school, the infrastructure wasn't really built up. And so the standards have grown. In my experience, programs like Safe Routes to School have enhanced our schools, have brought the knowledge to the schools, the school boards, the districts on the importance of kids learning to travel at a young age, right? They're our future commuters. So if we just have them in the car, send them in their classroom and on their way, what are they learning? So we're providing a mechanism and a vehicle for their experience to maybe get out of the car, walk to school, bike to school with their families. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the impact. I talked to one of the dads. We had a walk to school day. And one of the dads said, you know, I love this because walking to school with my child is the time I get to talk to them of the entire day. And the value of something like that is so great, but we don't realize it. So again, it's memorable moments like that for kids, but it's memorable moments for parents. And that will carry on later in life when they may need to make important decisions like, well, do we put a sidewalk here or do we put some kind of road here? So it's important for our communities and the value that it brings to not only safety, but that active transportation too. Now they're walking, they're living and enjoying their time.
And you see communities building more bike lanes. St. Petersburg, where our hosts are based, in downtown, like there's dedicated bike lanes, there's dedicated bike paths in Tampa now. Is that something, that kind of infrastructure, what we'll be seeing more of in the future? Is there a financial commitment to building that as opposed to just building more roads?
Yes, early on when I started at Cutter, I attended public meetings, and I remember we had a cycling advocate say, hey, there's no bike lane on this road. And as a cyclist myself, I was like, yeah, there's no bike lane on the road. And they put the bike lane on the road that I'm talking about. And fast forward, it's like, well, I haven't seen too many people ride on the road in the bike lane there. You know, what do the cyclists and the cyclists who aren't cycling but they want to cycle, what do they want? So over time, there's been surveys and public community surveys. What do the people want? that'll encourage themselves to ride or be a part of that infrastructure change. And we've seen more protected bike lanes go in. That's what people want. Now, the cost may be more significant, but the impact in ridership through those bike lanes will be much greater. And we are seeing that impact. Again, it's what the community wants for their infrastructure, and we have seen that change.
So Jose, at the port, and this might be a little less obvious to our audience or to people that are more used to the transportation system being roads, but are there things that Florida is doing because it is such a import heavy state in terms of the economy? There's something like, what, 19 ports across the state that you're doing that is sort of best practices, cutting edge, that is, the way forward as you talked about, building the efficiency into the port system.
Oh, absolutely. We've gone through a very significant investment period over the last probably 10 or so years, more so than ever before. Our capital program has, steadily increased, but it just recently just skyrocketed. A lot of that, unfortunately, it's because construction costs have significantly spiked, but we've also been in an incredible growth mode. So one trend that you've seen in the maritime industry is, and I've also seen in aviation, but it's just more and more the ships keep getting bigger because there's economies of scale. The more containers you can pack, the more cargo you can pack, the more efficient that trip is. But then if you have a bigger ship, now you need a wider channel, a deeper channel, a taller bridge, a taller crane, a wider crane, a faster crane. You need more trucks, more chassis, and all that. We've done it, and you've seen it again across the maritime industry, a really significant investment on the part of port authorities and terminal operators to accommodate the infrastructure that's required for those larger vessels. Behind that, you've seen a good push in the industry to reduce carbon emissions. So there's been a big effort on that. That is that takes a lot. There's all kinds of different alternatives that are being used. Really the current thought in the industry is really all solutions need to be available because there isn't a one size fits all. You can't do electric ships or this fuel or that kind of fuel. Is different uses for different types of ship. Things that have gone well. So the port has invested heavily. The DOT has they have funding available for ports. I think similar to airports, and they partner with us in investing with us. So that really helps take the edge off, if you would, on those investments because they know there is there's an economic benefit to the region. They're also helping us. We're partnering with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We completed a study evaluating the feasibility of expanding the navigational channel, going deeper. Our navigational channel, again, just provide some context. Starts just outside Egmont Key and is 40 miles all the way into downtown. So that is maintained by the federal government. So it takes federal appropriation, which goes to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we're partnering with them to do a deepening study. Study has been completed. It's been authorized by a recent WRDA, Water Resource Development Act legislation that was adopted late last year. So now we're working on there's some preliminary engineering going on, and we're working on appropriations for the construction. But it's really big for us, and it's a way for us to stay competitive. Talking about again those larger jetliners, you want to attract them just like we want to attract the larger ships. So if there's the route, for example, for containers that serves us comes Asia through the Panama Canal, and they hit the ports in the Gulf, and we're the last stop. If we're not competitive with those ports, then we're going to get bypassed. Now essentially would be like you living in a town that has a small airport. So you have to get those regional carriers to then go to the TIAs of the world to get to your destination. So that makes it more inefficient. It makes it more costly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to correct my numbers. It's 16 seaports
16 ports, yeah, correct.
and 19 commercial airports. So
Yes.
similar situation. I mean, you've got, it sounds like this really has come down to like a system that has to be finely tuned, because one entity ramping up and bringing more people in will run into maybe a problem, like you were talking about getting to the beach or getting, you want the cruise industry to thrive, but people got to fly in to get to the cruise ship for the most part. So how,
The planes are all delayed and the flights get canceled, then people are missing their cruise ships. That's a problem. Yeah, I was a journalist. I worked for the local CBS station for a lot of years. So I covered the aviation industry. I covered Tampa International Airport, the port, all those places. And, when I reported, we were reporting on how people are impacted and what people need to know, our viewers. Coming to work for the airport, it is amazing to me how much planning goes into thinking about the future and these massive, just eye-popping figures on some of these projects. And especially when the price changes, you plan ahead. We're getting ready to build our brand new 16-gate international terminal, which we desperately need to accommodate some of these new airlines that want to come in. We started that process before COVID. COVID happened, and obviously that threw a wrench in everyone's plans, so things were put on hold. And then now we're racing to try to, recalibrate that project. And now we've broken ground on Airside D, but the prices have all gone through the roof.
The state DOT is going through that challenge right now. They're having to look at their work list because the creeping cost of construction, like you said, just the timing of projects, it just keeps going up and up, and it's a huge, huge challenge.
But that's what, surprised me most when I started going to our board meetings every month and listening to all of these projects, even a project like putting up a new security fence around the entire perimeter of the airport. The amount of money and time and planning that goes into a project like that is unbelievable. And then you can only imagine what it's, when you talk about a new terminal or, as we've discussed in the past, a whole new main terminal to really expand our ability to accommodate passengers. The other thing is how far into the future airports plan. The FAA requires airports like Tampa International and others around the country to have a master plan, and I'm sure there's something similar with the ports as well. But we're planning 20, 30, 40 years into the future, and I'm constantly impressed when you look at the trajectory of the passenger projections, how accurate they oftentimes are. And we've seen time after time, whether it be 9/11 or coronavirus or a major economic downturn, we see these dips, but then it comes right back up to where they were projecting, and then you're playing that catch-up game.
sure, absolutely.
That's a fantastic perspective. Just any student that may be listening, if working at an airport or a port, maritime aviation industry hasn't even crossed your mind, absolutely fascinating. It's a different world because we're public entities, but we're attracting business. We are about business, about moving passengers, moving cargo. Same thing with us. We're moving passengers and cargo. So we have these, significant organizations behind us. The airport, much more so that, we're a lot smaller, but we operate very similar. We're drumming up business, and then we have to support that business with investment planning, infrastructure, and it's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, same thing. I came from the private sector to here, and I hope I enjoy it, and it's just been amazing, absolutely amazing experience.
And on that career point, it is a fascinating career to go into transportation, whether it be maritime or aviation. But just, as a reporter, I always wanted to have an impact on the audience. Coming to the airport, the impact that the airport has on everything from our local economy to kids getting home to see their grandma for Christmas. It's amazing the impact that you have on people. And if you want to have an impact on your community, these are careers that are really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, and clearly the careers of the future. None of this is going away like some other industries. Yeah. So, Jason, building, this very simplistic answer is, well, just build more roads. But that's expensive. It can be very, very expensive. The Florida Department of Transportation has these amazing charts on the per mile construction costs of a highway. And it's from a low of about $7 million a mile all the way up to $25 million a mile if you're building things like bike lanes and barriers and, the full accoutrement of what you would want in a roadway. So from your perspective, working at Qatar, we can't build our way out of this problem that we're in. So what then do we do? Even though, to the extent that Florida has invested billions of dollars, we've been very lucky that the economy has been good in the midst of this surge because the governor and the legislature have invested tens of billions of dollars into providing additional road capacity.
So I'd like to say we're talking cost here. One project we worked on was a citizens education program. This was a virtual citizens education program for people to learn more about transportation, what goes into the planning, what goes into the costs. And I think we had about 30 attendees or citizens attend this education. It was like 7 modules, and they were shocked at the cost of everything and the timing it takes to get everything done when it comes to planning roads, planning new infrastructure. I think that was a big takeaway with the program, was like that aha moment for them, like, oh wow, okay, it just doesn't happen at a snap of the finger. It could take years of planning and budgeting. And that has a lot to do with maybe why we can't get people out of the cars, and maybe we can't change that behavior because it's not so immediate. It's definitely, like I said earlier, incremental. I will say that some of my experiences recently, I don't know if you've been on the trolley streetcar downtown. I mean, sold out. Anytime I'm on it, it's just packed. It is fare free right now. Has been for about 3 years now, maybe even 4. And that didn't happen all of a sudden. That happened over time where people were like, oh, okay, I could ride this trolley to get from A to B and not drive my car, or park over here and do that first mile, last mile experience with their bike. Get on the bike to where they need to go, get on the trolley, and then bike on the next destination. I think it's experiences like that where our younger generation are learning, like, hey, there's other transportation options around us. One of the other newer transportation things that are occurring right now is the HART Bus Route 1, where you can ride Bus Route 1 from the university area to Marion Transit fare free for an entire year. That is unheard of, and it's huge. And apparently they're breaking record numbers to get that experience. That behavior change doesn't happen with, well, let me do it one time. It's, let me do it a couple times, and it's not really going to cost me anything at this time. And they're learning. The riders are learning, hey, what else can I do to get out of this car? And then again, that travel behavior with drivers, that is a hard thing to let go from time and money. And usually if it hits the pocket a little bit harder, like if it's the gas prices are up and it's a little tougher to afford it with insurance, yeah, you might try to find some other alternative modes of transportation to support it. But living in Tampa, it has been difficult over the years to find that other option, but we're getting there, and that's the important thing. We're getting to that spot, and that has to do with our bike ped infrastructure, our transit options, and just other opportunities working with our local agencies to, again, make it a better life around our communities and to work.
Yeah.
I grew up my entire life in St. Pete. I was, just like everyone I knew in St. Pete, we got in our air-conditioned car, and we would go to our air-conditioned, restaurant or wherever we were going, and we drove everywhere. And just the thought of taking a bus or, short of being a kid, riding a bike to go transport myself somewhere just never was really part of the equation. And there was really no reason to do anything other than drive a car, because I would get on 275 in St. Pete and it was smooth sailing. I grew up near Tyrone Square Mall and ended up going to the magnet program down at Lakewood High School, the CAT program, and it was easy to get to school every day. Now, fast forward all these years later, and I get on 275 in St. Pete, and it's a different story, because now I oftentimes do run into major congestion, and it's not just during rush hour. At all hours of the day, you can run into that traffic, and that's where you might start to see some of that behavior change, is if it becomes inconvenient to drive. Obviously, they've always had, traffic jams on the Howard Franklin Bridge and Malfunction Junction and other places across the Tampa Bay area. But as we think about potential alternatives to driving in the future, I think that demand for a better alternative is going to come out of people being inconvenienced or, price problems. And of course, if you do travel around, when I've been to Japan and rode on those super fast trains and seeing how easy it is to get anywhere you want to go in the entire country, even going to New York and riding the amazing, public transit system there, getting out of Florida and seeing how some of these other places operate is pretty inspirational.
And we do get a lot of visitors too, with our transportation system as far as the bike paths, the bike trails. The new Howard Franklin Bridge now has have a bike path on it. So you can now go from one side to the other, riding a bike, walking, running. I think that's very progressive. It's very progressive for our community to have something like that, like a long stretch of highway or a bridge, and move from one end to the other. I think we're moving in the right direction with our transportation. Again, it is taking those steps though.
Earlier question about what we're doing right. I can tell you, as an engineer, you design a road, the pedestrian and bike facilities are not an afterthought anymore. It's just a standard in how you're going to connect it and how you're going to make it functional. And I think it's something that I've seen in my career. From, hey, we're just going to widen the road and do this and that. Now it's okay. You got to provide the pedestrian facility and provide the bike facility. And it's good to see. I work downtown. I live close to downtown. Matter of fact, rode Route 1 last night because I had an event downtown, and I said, why am I going to Uber? I'm just going to. I mean, it was right there. Now that it's free, it's even more convenient. So it's good. It's good to see. I can tell you, I'm sort of in that kind of. It's an interesting case because we have our headquarters building. It's downtown, over in the Channel District, which is where we have all the cruise activity. So the Channel District, if you guys are familiar, you've seen a lot of growth in that area, mixed use, a lot of residential. So you have cruise passengers walking around. You have the residents walking around and all that. But then you also have a lot of car traffic getting in and out of the different terminals. So it's just sort of kind of congested area. And the city's done a fantastic job of the road dieting and complete street projects, wide sidewalks, and all that. But at the same time, as an operator, I need to get my passengers in and out fast because they don't like the congestion. They will complain to the cruise lines, say, the port was a mess. I'm never gonna sail Port Tampa Bay again. And the cruise lines are fickle. They want an absolute. I'm sure it's the same thing with the airlines. They want the best experience, and they will complain to us. You need to fix this, or we're gonna pull out of here. So we need to be. It's a bit of a struggle. It's a challenge because you're in a downtown area, pedestrian. It's a heavy pedestrian use. So we're not gonna put a freeway. But at the same time, we need to be able to move vehicles. We need to move trucks. When the cruise ships are here, they are provisioning. They are loading up with food, chlorine for the pools, oil, what have you. They are unloading passengers, loading passengers, and getting those provisions for that next sailing. So we're not gonna get rid of that of the truck movement. So we need to be compatible. Mindful of, hey, we all need to coexist in a peaceful manner. Yeah. But it's a challenge. But it has been good to see. Yeah. From that perspective.
I'm going to credit former Mayor Bob Buckhorn for this line because he was the first one I heard say it. So I'm hoping it was his original line. Is that that a truck can leave Tampa's port and deliver goods to New York City without ever encountering a traffic light.
Once you leave our main terminal there, that you can kind of see from downtown Hooker's Point. There's a thing you hit one light, and then you can get on the Selmon connector, get on either I-4, which takes you to 95 or 75, what have you, and we'll make it all the way to New York without stopping, theoretically.
Does your efficiency sometimes become sort of a, is it a curse or a blessing? Because the more efficient you become, the more business you're going to attract.
So,
And with reshoring and a lot of nearshoring coming along,
so we are lucky that we have space to grow. So we certainly are open to receiving that business. There's some spots where we've gotten busy and we've seen some congestion, and we're working to address that congestion. One of our terminals right now, Bert 218, is under construction. It's going to be dedicated to the import of cement and aggregate. And that's currently being shared by one of the things that we bring also is produce. So it's kind of like a share berth. Because we've been successful in both businesses, and not just us, but of course our operators are the ones that move the cargo. It got congested. So for example, something like perishables will have priority over a cement ship. So a cement ship is unloading, and the perishable ship comes in. You kind of tell the cement ship, you got to get out of the way so I can unload the perishables, otherwise they expire. Well, they don't like that because now they have to sort of sit there, for a day, not being able to load, and that costs people money. So that little bit of inefficiency there. So we're working on addressing it because again, we want to make sure to keep our cargo lines and our terminal operators happy and efficient.
and same thing at the Tampa airport, the better you get, the more people want to be there. And so there has to be a tipping point, right? Or do you just, you can't keep building forever. You're sort of hemmed in by.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a certain truth to that. I will say that the forefathers of Tampa International Airport did an amazing job by providing a huge piece of land where we can expand and grow for many years to come. We have room for additional runways. We have room for additional expansion. So in that respect, we're not, worried about running out of land anytime soon. But again, it's just keeping up with that demand for having enough parking spots for cars, and how many parking garages are you going to build? The potential for how do we continue to make our main terminal have enough room for all these passengers? How can we make it more efficient? How do we adjust to technology? Back many years ago, the airline ticket counters were a lot different. The way people checked in for their flights were completely different. They have to have cash registers back, behind the office to deal with cash. People don't come up to the ticket counter and buy, plane tickets with cash as much anymore. And so the way people check in has changed dramatically. So when you go to some of these brand new terminals, they've got all automated kiosks where you hit a couple buttons, you get your boarding pass, whatever prints out for your baggage, and you put it on a conveyor belt and it goes. And so that's one of the things that Tampa International Airport you'll see in the coming years. Our main terminal at the ticketing level will change dramatically as we kind of open up that entire area and create a system that is not as much of a ticket counter with offices behind it. It'll be a lot more open and able to accommodate more people, along with the Red Express curbsides, which will be coming online soon. Even our TSA security checkpoints. We've just completed, we're going to have a ribbon cutting here very soon for Airside E, a brand new security checkpoint area with all the latest, greatest TSA equipment, but it'll have more space. We've expanded the building because, let's face it, when our airport was designed, that was before 9/11, before TSA ever existed, the security process was a lot different. So it's a big part of it is just evolving and coming up with creative ways to continue to keep the airport functioning in an efficient way.
Mm-hmm. That's a great place to sort of segue into the future technology that will come to bear on all of this. So whether it's artificial intelligence or sensor technology, people talk about smart cities, smart roadways. Jason, are you seeing something from a technological standpoint on what can help break through the quandary of how we just keep up with the population growth and the demand growth?
Well, as far as the connectivity, the connection with the population, I think the best thing that's happened and the worst thing are the apps. The connection to devices, to, let's say, ride sharing. the different opportunities to connect to the bus apps. A lot of the bus apps that are out there right now are getting smarter. There's more gamification behind it too, so it's encouraging. From my end, I think that's one of the best things when it comes to transit is that those bus apps are becoming more acceptable and visually like, okay, I can do this app, and it's kind of a gamification mode. I think that's kind of where we're heading with that as far as transit, because I've seen it firsthand there. Yeah, and the ability to maybe not even have a car and live in an urban district, I think that's another, when you think of technology and, hey, I can go catch a ride share here or catch a e-scooter here or e-bike there, and not own a vehicle and just live downtown. I think that's an amazing thing that's happening to the Tampa Bay region when it comes to maybe St. Pete or downtown Tampa, Clearwater. So we're seeing these big changes with our downtowns, and that could be more connected vehicles that are occurring downtown, or not, I'm sorry, not downtown, but connected vehicle studies in general. And we're seeing a change. They're not there yet, but again, like with transportation and everything else, it's incremental over time.
And Bo, at the airport, eVTOL, which I don't think that people in Florida realize that the state really is very much on the cutting edge of this technology. That is something, you know, this concept of flying cars and air taxi is not the Jetsons anymore. It's coming rather quickly.
I'm curious in our audience, how many of you know what eVTOL is? Have you heard of this before? Is this a new term? So eVTOL stands for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing. These are electric-powered aircraft that will be arriving at a city near you very soon. And we're not talking, I mean, this sounds like Jetson stuff, but we're talking about technology that's going to be here in the coming years. I mean, very soon you're going to start seeing this. And one of the amazing things is Florida has positioned itself to be one of the test markets or an industry leader in this new technology. So basically what we're talking about here would be an electric vehicle that will take off vertically. And let's say you're at Tampa International Airport, you've just come in on one of these international flights, the bridge is all backed up, you want to get out to Clearwater Beach. How long is that going to take you to get out to Clearwater Beach? Well, on one of these eVTOLs, you'd be out there in 10 minutes. And, how much will it cost? It'll be a little more expensive at first, but the plan is with this new technology is to make it all automated. So you wouldn't have a pilot in there eventually. It'd be like an autonomous flying vehicle. There would be someone monitoring you on the ground. But that's where the price point is going to come down and make it really affordable for everyone. Tampa International Airport was one of the first airports to build in this new technology into our master plan. We know this technology is absolutely coming. It's just a matter of how quickly some of the government regulations and the FAA regulations can get hammered out. But as I mentioned, we had the first test flight. And if we have a second, if we could roll the video, I'll show you a quick clip. This was back in November of 2023, Tampa International Airport, the very first major U.S. commercial airport to hold an eVTOL test flight.
Welcome to a very historic day here at Tampa International Airport.
We're about to be the first major commercial airport to host an urban air mobility flight test.
Joe said, "Why are you not flying Florida?" We said, "Why not?"
It's exciting for us to be one of the first, and this will be a very, very big part of transforming Tampa's tomorrow.
Moves from terminal to plane.
From the beginning, Tampa International has been all about innovation. It's in our DNA.
We wanted to have as many people as possible that can hear and see and witness that this is becoming a reality.
This aircraft will go above all the traffic and take you where you need to go.
It's designed to be accessible to everyone. Seeing is believing, hearing is believing.
Urban air mobility is definitely a huge part of the future of transportation.
Very fortunate to have a very popular social media. Our social media guy posted this video out there, and we got all kinds of amazing responses in the comments. One of the things I did hear was, "Oh, this is just for rich people. This is not what we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on more realistic transportation opportunities. But I don't think this is going to be just for rich people. Maybe at first, the price point may be expensive, but it's coming. It's going to be everything from cargo and getting things from the airport over to the port quickly. It will be getting from Tampa to St. Petersburg. It'll be getting from Tampa to Orlando and avoiding some of those traffic scenarios. One of the reasons that I think the different manufacturers of these aircraft and the different companies that are trying to develop this technology, they really love Florida as a test market is because of our geography. When you think about all of our bridges and just, how hard it can be when there's a backup on 275 or the Gandy Bridge to get from one place to the other, our geography really lends itself to this technology and getting around. This will be here before you know it. It's obviously there are going to be a lot of federal aviation hurdles in terms of getting all of the things fully approved by the government to make sure that this technology is safe. But it will be here soon.
And Jose, technology at the port, autonomous vehicles, robotics, sensor technology, you're on the cutting edge too.
So unfortunately, the helicarrier from the Avengers doesn't exist, so we're not going to see that at the port yet. The shipping version of the eVTOLs, but yeah, we would be a destination for them for sure. But yeah, same. Even though we can be I think the industry can be a little bit traditional sometimes. I mean, doing the same thing. We've done it for a long time. I was laughing the other day. I saw one of those kind of futuristic type articles. Like there's this new cargo ship, and it's this new technology. It's wind assisted. So I'm like, so you discover sail ships? We've been moving cargo with sail ships for quite a while. I think we've been there for a long time. But you're seeing emerging technology on ships. I mentioned alternative fuels, electric, a lot of AI assisted technology, little things to improve the efficiency of the cargo movement. Just the sailing. Now on the land side, you're seeing it with the autonomous vehicles. So what happens a lot of times is you bring the cargo, for example, like in containers, you bring it onto a truck, a yard hauler is what they call it, and it just moves the container within sort of the local terminal before it goes out over the road. So you're seeing automation in those vehicles, automations in our cranes, which is I will tell you it's can be has been a bit of a challenge with labor. Because they see that as a threat. So there's been, if you pay attention to the news, you've seen some of that. So it's been kind of ongoing, but we're evolving. That everybody knows that we had to evolve as an industry. Other countries have really adopted a lot of technology. I think here in the U.S. we've been a little bit slower in certain realms. But for us, not just us as a port, but as an industry. We have to adopt more technology, so you're seeing it more and more. Trucking as well. I was talking to a terminal operator. They've incorporated AI into their truck movements, and they're able to find all kinds of efficiencies, predicting how long it's going to take a truck to get for example, when you're delivering concrete from a batch plant to a job site, you have a limited amount of time before you have to turn that truck around. Otherwise, that concrete is too old for you to put it in place, right? So timing on concrete delivery incredibly important. So they've been like I said, adopting AI, and they're able to better predict how long it's going to take a truck to get there, so they can then call ahead to the construction company and say, hey, the next truck's going to be there in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Hurry up, slow down. We're going to stop right now because we're not going to be able to make it. So let's move on to the next day. So things like that. So yeah, a lot of improvements, a lot of different things out there. Again, people trying to figure out what's best suited for their operations. Again, what's good for containers may not be as good for the movement of other products. So it's also very product dependent.
It really is amazing, this AI stuff, in terms of all the different applications that are being dreamed up, even at the airport. I mean, we're using an old technology called LiDAR, which is the same type of technology that your car has when it's backing up and it boop, 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 you know, it kind of can see or detect, you know, things around you. We're using that same type of technology in our different terminals to basically, there's LiDAR readers that can see every passenger. And it's not like, you know, recording your face or anything like that. You show up as a dot on this LiDAR screen, and then AI can then tell our operations team, okay, 300 people have passed through the security checkpoint, or we're starting to see a backup. We need to slow down the trains or the shuttles, or a certain number of people have walked into the restroom. It's time to clean them. And so a lot of different ways that we're looking at using this technology and AI. In some cases, existing technology, we're incorporating the AI in a new way. Even talking about safety out on the runway and incursions and things like that. There's new technology up in the air traffic control tower that is providing those controllers with a view of the airport that helps them see everything that's going on, including some of the vehicles that are, you know, moving around the airfield. So
You're seeing, just real quick, as you mentioned, the cruise industry has adopted, with not the cruise industry necessarily, but with federal government, Customs and Border Protection, seeing facial recognition. So it makes which, you know, I know has, you know, sort of, you know, those separate, you know, issues there with, you know, kind of the data and all that, which, but it makes the loading and unloading faster because, you know, we know that you are the same person that got on the ship. So to stop, you don't need to check your ID. It's both. You can go, you know, so, and that's, again, talking about efficiencies.
anything to get through security faster, you know.
Yeah.
They've already got your picture on the ID. If we could just match it up with who you are, then
People pay for those alcohol packages. They want to get to the bar real quick.
Yeah, there you go. Jason, one I think is one of the coolest projects that Tampa has been at the forefront is the connected vehicle project on the Selman Expressway, which has actually been going on for some time now. I know that some of your coworkers colleagues at Qatar have been involved in that. I don't know if you've been involved in that project at all, or what you're learning from that.
No, I personally have been involved in that project, but my colleagues, they're doing an amazing job at it. I know they have a great partnership with the agencies, so I'm very happy to see it all.
Yeah,
move forward.
what they're learning from, that was one of the very early connected vehicle projects in the United States, funded through a very large federal grant that's been going on for years. And they've actually had just real commuters sign up to be a part of it, and just understanding how connected vehicles can move more efficiently and more safely on, you know, what is a heavily trafficked roadway here. And just there's so many things that I think, and I think some of it is because we are a young state that understands if we don't get ahead of this growth, it'll destroy the quality of life. People really are embracing technology in interesting ways here. We're going to move to questions because we're getting close here. So if any of our audience members have some questions, we'd love to hear them. Sure, go ahead. I'm going to repeat the question so that the audience at home, because they probably couldn't hear you. It was about the ferry system connecting Tampa to St. Pete and what the future of that might be in terms of connecting it to other points of transit in the area.
So the initial, I think one of the additional routes on the Tampa side, actually, the loading area, if you would, it was actually right next door, was at the aquarium. It's now moved to the convention center. It's a little bit more of an efficient location. But yeah, I mean, you know, if you get off of a ship, walk over to the convention center, hop over to the 40-hour ferry ride to get to the beaches. I mean, I can't think something more attractive. I mean, the more attractions we can provide our passengers, just makes for a better experience. You know, I think we're this year we're projecting to move about 1.4 or 1.5 million cruise passengers, which I know in context of the airport is, but for us it's fantastic. You know, we've grown in a lot in the cruise industry, and that comes with people liking to come to Tampa because they fly through a great airport, and then there's attractions that they can see. So if they have that ease of connectivity to you know the beaches out in Pinellas County, then you know it's a great ad.
Mm-hmm.
There are specific flights that exist specifically because we have cruises, both in and out of Tampa. So we've got direct flights to the west coast of Canada now because there are a lot of people that want to go on an Alaskan cruise. And so don't underestimate those cruise passengers because they're huge.
Yeah, and with like mobility as a service, so there are applications where you can, you know, walk somewhere, hop on a bike, get on transit. I don't think the cross ferry is included in that, but it's not a bad idea to also include that as an option because now we're getting from one side of the bay to the other. It's definitely a great idea.
When I drive on 275 into the airport every day, as I drive by where the old Doubletree Hotel used to be, and where Charlie's Steakhouse is, if you're familiar with that section of interstate there, the Florida Department of Transportation is planning a multimodal center there. And so the airport has made accommodations for if and when that is ever built, and there's some type of light rail, we have accommodations for that light rail to go into our SkyConnect station and connect with our train system. And then, you know, theoretically that would connect to downtown Tampa and to, you know, what we're talking about with the Cross Bay Ferry. So the idea is connecting some of these different modes of transportation and eventually the eVTOLs as well, and giving people options for how to get around.
Mm-hmm. So, any more questions from our audience?
Yep.
Well,
I think somebody maybe.
I can't quite see, so speak up if you're out there and you have a question. Oh.
No question.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Can you repeat
So
that?
I'll repeat the question for the audience. What are the biggest challenges for Florida expanding and maintaining its transit system?
I think we need to change some minds. I think, you know, when you talk about transit, I mean, we invest a lot in roads, in port infrastructure and all that. For providing alternatives. I mean, there's only so many lanes you can build. You know, so we need to provide alternatives. You know, we as a port thrive on multimodal. You know, we have a lot, you know, miles and miles of rail, so we're able to move cargo that way. So I think we need to provide alternatives, not just road widening projects. We keep growing and we keep adding lanes, and the congestion is still there. So it's a challenge, and I think we're sometimes missing opportunities.
There's only so much Tampa International Airport can do on its own. There's only so much the city of St. Petersburg can do on its own. There's only so much Hillsborough County can do on its own. And I think a big part of solving some of our challenges, we've talked all about this planning and how much planning we do, but planning ahead as a region and coming together. Tampa International Airport is not just Tampa's airport, it's the entire region's airport. And we would not have international flights to places like Zurich and Panama City and all over the world if it was just people from Tampa. We are drawing in passengers from Citrus County, from Sarasota, from Polk County, from the villages even. And, you know, we have to think and plan like a region and not just individual communities.
We have a question from our online audience. This is a really good one. We've not touched on it, but it's important. How has the environment been kept in mind as Florida keeps growing, avoiding urban sprawl, maintaining biodiversity, limiting carbon emissions? Jason, do you get to touch on the environment at all?
No,
Your work?
but I know there are environmental studies before any major infrastructure projects that take place. That's, I'm not sure with all the agencies that are doing the infrastructure projects, but for the most part, I believe it's a requirement for many areas where they're doing infrastructure projects that may be a new roadway, a new segment, a new community. So there are steps that they have to take to ensure the environment is looked after.
Yeah. One thing that I've seen in my travels around the state, and this is really just sort of taking root right now, is the Live Local Act, which really incentivizes development around existing transit corridors, and it's seen as a policy that also can limit sprawl. So if you can build housing, and there's an element about affordable housing and workforce housing into the policy that is really trying to encourage developers to focus more inward in the urban areas, look for redevelopment possibilities, and there are obviously environmental benefits for that. If our urban areas are not sprawling and we're not consuming green space for new housing, that's better for the land that Florida wants to conserve and to keep as much Florida natural as possible, which is a struggle with as many people coming here.
I mean, one thing that I mentioned efficiency. If it's efficient, there is a net reduction in carbon emissions. If a ship is taking a long route to get to, some other port, and then that cargo is getting loaded in a truck and then being trucked to Florida, assure you that I can do some real quick math and show you that the ship traveling to Tampa, unloading and reducing truck miles is a net positive for the environment because there's less carbon emissions. So we keep talking about efficiency, but in those efficiencies, it's really quickly to realize a reduction in carbon emissions.
Mm-hmm.
So in any to your point about environmental studies, we invested significantly in our growth and in a couple of marine projects, and we spent a long time before we even put a shovel on the ground going through those environmental studies, and making sure that species are protected, and doing greenhouse gas accounting and things like that. So there's a lot of planning and studying that we do before we tackle any of those efforts. Do benthic studies and we're aware what kind of species we're dealing with. If there's any kind of impact that we mitigate for it. So you go through significant amount of calculations before you finish those. So we're not doing things in a vacuum. Sure.
Yeah, but the reality is there, and we don't see it as much here in the urban area because it's already been built over. But there are vast sections of Florida where pasture land is becoming housing developments, and you do see the stress on the roads there because those tend to be rural highways that now have lots of people living on them. So it doesn't. If you get up near the villages and in that part of that sort of north central Florida area. I think the environmental issue might be more of a daily conversation about how much land is being consumed just to move people, which is a considerable amount. So we did have another follow-up question from our online audience, and this is on the technology issue and labor displacement. So automation displacing labor, is that an issue? I mean, my understanding is at least that there's been labor shortages that your industries have been trying to deal with. So is automation threaten jobs, or is it maybe help solve some of the labor shortages that we've been experiencing?
I personally see it as a we need to grow. I mean, we don't build cars the same way that a Ford Motor Company was building Model Ts back in the 20s, right? Where we have you still see manual labor alongside machine labor. So I think we need to evolve as an industry, adapt with automation, look for ways to make it more efficient and safer. If there's ways that we can delegate some maybe less safe work to machines, I think that's a net positive.
Great. Well, gentlemen, I think we're completed our questions. And thank you so much for your various perspectives and expertise. It's a really exciting future, getting back to our theme, which is the future of transportation. I think we're going to see some really interesting things, and I think all of us being, Floridians, and we've had a very Tampa-focused conversation, but this really applies to many of the urban areas of the state, there is a lot of interest in doing things differently, pushing the boundaries, thinking about transportation differently, and so it's a good area to watch in the future. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for having us. And the key that I heard from you was it's not an afterthought anymore. There's a lot of planning going on with a lot of the things that we've talked about today, to planning for the future.
You mentioned plans from the 60s. So years ago, I went to this engineering society, and I know we're trying to wrap up. I apologize. Sort of technical thing, and some engineers and plans for the airport talking about future plans and all that. And one of the things that they talked about, they just blew my mind. They said, we're working based on a master plan that they did back in the 60s, and it's still to this day. It was so well done that we're still growing according to that. And that blew my mind as an engineer. I thought, what amazing foresight these folks had. And it goes to show you what good planning leads to.
Yeah, that's a great ending thought. Planning is everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough, Vicki, for leading this really robust conversation. I was over there in the corner and people are texting me as they're watching you all. So you had some players around the state listening to your very interesting conversation. Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Jason, for contributing to this really exceptional conversation about transportation, which I know I was saying it took me 2 hours to get here on a regular day. For those of you all who are here, thank you for your time again, and thank you to our online audience. We do hope that you continue to come to our conversations at the Institute. We are traveling to Miami on Monday to work with Miami-Dade and FIU on the Everglades program conversation we've been trying to put together for a while. All of our programs are virtual. And if you can't come in real time and you can't flick on your phone or whatever device you prefer to watch from, you can always watch it afterwards. Then after that, next week, if you're in the Bay Area, we're going to have a program called Listening to Kids. A lot of the judges and just people who are in agencies in the area care about our foster kids aging out and the challenges that occur when they are put into our community, and how we can do a better job of listening to them instead of thrusting them into challenging positions. And then we have our State of the Beaches. Our mayors from the beaches are going to have a conversation. Al Rochelle is going to lead that conversation. We did this 2 years ago for 2 years back to back. We're bringing it back in light of the hurricanes and everything that occurred over our past year, so we hope that they have a lot of insight to discuss of what's next. And finally, thanks to one of our team members who has a love for the environment, we're doing a Earth Week beach cleanup for our 3rd year in a row. This is just our spring calendar. All of our programs are on our website. We value your input. The beauty of the Institute is that Congressman Young left it as a space to educate and have an understanding of very difficult issues that we hope that we pick experts who can distill like this evening into digestible information. So we hope that you follow us on any of our social medias, that you reach out. I always want to say a big thank you to our team. Also, for those of you all, you can go back to that last slide quickly. For those of you all who want to learn more about Congressman Young, I find myself in a very difficult position always time introducing a giant. People who knew his incredible footprint to our state, not just our community locally, really know him, and there are a lot of young people who are just now discovering, but I can assure you, you benefit from the work that this man did. And so we have a small documentary that we've done that you can scan to learn a little bit more about why he created the Institute. And then finally, thank you, Kyle, for your patience. If you can follow us on any of our social media or reach out to us, we'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you again all for your time and for your energy. We appreciate your time tonight. Have a good night.